Hello and welcome to Good Night, Faithful Friends. This is the first episode. My name is Josh, and I'm your host. In this show, I will be talking about the world of Weeping Cedars and everything that's in it. I will be covering every detail, every mystery. I will unravel everything so you don't have to do the work. Hold on. Nope, apparently that's not true. I'm not going to be doing that. I am here to update you. I apparently don't understand my own podcast here. I am here to update you on what is going on in the Weeping Cedars universe, helped by my imaginary producer, who I'm sure that'll go extremely well. It can't go badly, not in this Weeping Cedars universe. So we are here. Let's see. Today we're going to be talking about everything that is currently in production in the Weeping Cedars universe and the things that are already coming out, the things that have come out, the things that will come out, so that you, as a Weeping Cedars listener, or perhaps you listen to Samite, or perhaps you listen to Rod of Amber, have some idea about what is going on. And so this first episode will serve as a kind of overview of everything that's out there as of right now at the end of February 2026, so that you can kind of situate yourself. If you're hungry for more Weeping Cedars and you think you've gone through all of it, maybe you have, but there is quite a bit out there, and maybe you've missed something. So we're going to start the show with an overview with the state of Weeping Cedars as it exists. Then we're going to move on to what is currently in production, what is being written. And then I guess we're going to wrap things up, because that's kind of all we have to cover in the first episode, which is what exists and what is coming. If you would like to send in a question, you can do that either through the comments on this episode or wherever you are getting your episode. That could be YouTube or Apple Podcast or Spotify. Actually, I don't know if Apple Podcast does comments, but Spotify does, YouTube does. I think Amazon does, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'll be posting episodes on the Reddit and the Patreon, so you can kind of get at me any of those places. But you can always also email me at contact@weepingcedars.com. So with that being said, let's talk about the overview of everything in the Weeping Cedars universe. If you want to get at stuff in the whole story as it exists, this is kind of what you have to do. So the original podcast, the very first podcast was a prequel actual play podcast on the Refugees of Esmeralda podcast that came out in 2018. That is a 6-episode adventure featuring 3 characters, Nate, Alan, and Joe. And that series is a little difficult to talk about at the moment, because as I'm getting ready to, or not getting ready to, as I'm currently rewriting that series as a novel, we've hit a couple of bumps as far as permissions go. So I'm not going to say a whole lot about that original series. You can go listen to it on the Refugees of Esmeralda podcast. Everybody, I think, does a great job, but the sound recording's not great. Plus, it was made when Weeping Cedars wasn't really clearly established yet. It was just sort of an adventure in a town that was sort of like Silent Hill, a spooky town that transformed and changed, and there was some horrible stuff. It went pretty well, though, and it intrigued me, and I've always been a big fan of Silent Hill. So I thought I want to explore my own version of that, and I had my some plans for a different podcast that I was going to do. So I blended all of that together, and we have the main podcast series, Weeping Cedars, which is mostly a combination of historical documentary episodes and news at night episodes. That ran for 3 seasons, 2019, 20, 21. And then we had a spinoff, a secret spinoff. People who get into Samite now maybe don't recognize that when Samite was originally released, it was released, the first 4 episodes, the whole first season, were released 4 days in a row across a week. My name was not on the show until the final episode. It was a secret Weeping Cedars spinoff that I tried to seed out to Weeping Cedars fans through different means. And for some people, it ended up working out really well. But people who get into Samite now, they might come to Samite first. And that's a perfectly valid way to come to the Weeping Cedars universe. But originally, Samite was supposed to be a secret surprise for Weeping Cedars fans. And for some people, it turned out to be that. But it was a very sort of, unique situation at the time that you can't really reproduce unless you just accidentally listen to Weeping Cedars and then accidentally listen to Samite, and you don't know that they're related. That ran from 2022, 2023, 2024. And then the third podcast series was Rod of Amber, which ran until 2025. So 23, 24, 25. Both of those are sort of self-contained, smaller stories that aren't self-contained at all. Honestly, that's really a lie, because they are part of the larger universe. They interconnect with Weeping Cedars. They interconnect with each other. And so those are the three main podcasts. And then you have the Refugees of Esmeralda prequel, which as of right now, I'm saying is not canon anymore. I'm going to be revising a lot of that canon in the book that's coming up, but as of right now, you should just sort of see Refugees of Esmeralda as a legend. Let's do the Star Wars thing where these are legends now. But it was not really a fully fleshed out Weeping Cedars universe at the time. Of course, no installment in the Weeping Cedars universe is part of the fully fleshed out Weeping Cedars universe until the last one, I guess. But a lot of the lore had not yet been worked out, and elements of the lore that existed before Weeping Cedars had not yet been integrated into the Weeping Cedars universe. And that's something I can maybe talk about another time, is the pre-existing lore of Grad Ludi, of the City of Madmen, of the Librarian, and the Queen and Samite. They all existed before Weeping Cedars as part of a Dungeons & Dragons campaign. And so, we could talk more about that another time if people are interested in that. If they're not, I won't bother you with it. Beyond the existing podcasts, there are 2 books. There is a short story collection called Shards of Amber, which is meant to be read either with or after Rod of Amber. So if you listen to all of Rod of Amber and you listened to it a couple of years ago, it's probably worth listening to again before you read Shards of Amber. But if you've just listened to it or you're listening to it now, you can start Shards there. They were sort of meant to go one podcast episode and then a short story. They were released like that, and I'll be releasing the free stories again as soon as the exclusivity for Shards of Amber is over with Amazon Kindle. They have an auto renew on that thing, which is a little crappy. So the exclusivity renewed on Kindle Unlimited for Shards of Amber when I didn't really want it to, because we have those free stories that'll go back on the Patreon. But as soon as they do, that should be in March, and you guys will be able to read those short stories for free and then decide whether or not you want the last 6, which are exclusive only to the book. Then we also have the gigantic 700-page horror novel, Lightning Falls, which takes place in a town that's first mentioned in Weeping Cedars and then mentioned again in Samite. And we have a lot of new characters for you to meet, a lot of new history, but also some familiar faces and some interconnecting history, things that explain, maybe not obviously, but give you enough pieces that you can understand how Lightning Falls relates to other things inside of the Weeping Cedars universe. It's a big book. There's 9 sections. 5 of those are about the main character, and 4 of them are historical. And they give you that kind of Weeping Cedars background and history that you might not get in a normal novel. And it is a gear shift. When you're used to kind of the documentary style podcast, Lightning Falls is definitely a gear shift. But hopefully people will enjoy it. It has some good reviews on Goodreads, though not many. So if you've listened to it, hey, this is going to be probably my every episode plea to please review the books on Amazon and Goodreads. It really, really, really helps. So that's the official big stuff. There's a lot more in written format that you can read on the Patreon for free. It's letters, it's memos, it's little pieces of communication and journals that I've been putting out for years, since maybe the third season of Weeping Cedars. It's where Crystalline Mansion was first introduced. Those little glimpses into people's lives and communications are there on the website, and you can find them all linked under the newsletter section of the website, weepingcedars.com/newsletter. You can find links to all of those things, the original Akonda set monthly, as well as letters from characters to other characters. So that's kind of a big piece of the Weeping Cedars corpus that I think a lot of people haven't read. There's also a very short-lived beginning to a comic that I would like to return to at some point on the Patreon. It is the bad art is done by me, so forgive me for subjecting you to my art. But it was meant to be a story about a brother and sister in the Cartwright family. And there's a familiar name in there. There's a couple familiar names in there that people will know from Weeping Cedars, but also from some of the stuff that's coming out currently. So, Weeping Cedars, Samite, Rod of Amber, those are the podcasts. Shards of Amber and Lightning Falls, those are the current books. And then a bunch of letters and journals and all sorts of things like that are on the Patreon for free. All you have to do is be a free member to get access to those things. So that covers our current state. And now I'll talk about the things that are currently coming out / in production. So in production, I guess, at the moment, there are 2 books currently being written. Make that 3 books currently being written. I understand that I have maybe a little bit of a reputation in the community here of having way too much on my plate. And that is true. I do. I have way too much on my plate. I have too many projects. I hope that the release schedule of these things at least exonerates me a little bit of over-promising and under-delivering. There are projects that have been started that have not come to fruition. That's 100% true. The video game, for example, I simply don't have time to finish it. I would love to have some funding to be able to pay somebody to help me finish it. But at the moment, at least, the video game that's up on Steam in the sort of coming soon area is not going to be finished as it was. That being said, pieces of it have ended up elsewhere. And so that's kind of how it works in the Weeping Cedars universe, is if something does get canceled, it doesn't die. It sort of shambles on in another form. So pieces of that video game are absolutely in console, especially Atlas of the Unknown. That was something that was created for that video game and is now existing in console. Talk about console in just a minute. So there are 3 books currently in production. One is a collection of short stories called The Hum of Glory. That will be a Samite-focused short story collection in the way that Shards of Amber is a Rod of Amber short story collection. 2 novels that are currently in production. The one I'm working on and focused on most, because I thought it was going to be an easy write, turns out it's very difficult, is the book Drowned, a Weeping Cedars story. This is a retelling of Alan, Joe, and Nate's original adventure in Weeping Cedars. And it is a complete reworking of that adventure. There are certainly some things that are similar. There are characters that show up and events that happen that are definitely part of the Weeping Cedars canon and lore. but big rewrites. A couple of things that I'm trying to do are to keep some of the characterizations for a couple of the characters, but like Joe is getting a complete rewrite from top to bottom. The only thing in common between the Joe of the podcast and the Joe of the book is his name. He has a different ethnic heritage. He has a different job. He's in town for different reasons. So the Joe of the book is going to be just a completely different character than the one in the podcast, with really only the first name being in common. I'm changing the last name as well. And there are certain events that are obviously have to happen that are common between the characters. But otherwise, these are not the same character. Nate is getting a little bit of a rework because of his personality and character in Lightning Falls. Of the three, I'm hoping Alan stays the most similar, because I really love Alan and how both absolutely caustic and curmudgeonly he is, but also how eloquent he is. I really love what Blaine did with that character. So yeah, that is going to be coming out. So we're going to see Nate in that. And I guess I've spoiled also that Nate is in Lightning Falls. So there you go. If you've listened to Refugees of Esmeralda and you're like, oh, I like that Nate character, I wonder if he ever shows up again. Yes, Lightning Falls, you can expect to see Nate. The other book that is currently being written, which is off to the side for the moment, but is in a fairly good state as far as a first draft goes, is Lightning Falls 1976. That won't be the final name of it, but that's what I'm calling it right now. It's an adventure in Lightning Falls that takes place in 1976. It is heavily influenced by two pieces of media. One, the first season of True Detective, and two, All the President's Men. Those are kind of my two North Stars in that book, to try to bring a story in Wallowa County, Oregon, that is unique in the Weeping Cedars universe, that we haven't done raw detective story. And I want to come at this from two different directions: the direction of a state trooper and the direction of a reporter. And that's where those two stories really come together. I will also say I have acquired some materials from the Oregon State Police from the 1970s that are absolutely amazing. Huge thanks to the Oregon State Police Archives, who were willing to send me photocopies of their annual reports for a couple of the years. And it is just chock full of wonderful information. And that is very much how I like to do this. I like to get as much realistic history into these things as I can without overdoing it, without really just giving you pages of history. So that book is, I would say, about 2/3 through its first draft. It is on the shelf while I finish Drowned. Drowned is nearing the end of its first draft. I don't know if Drowned is going to get out this year. I could, if I rushed it, I think I could get it out. But given that I do want to put it through a fairly good beta read, I'm not sure about that. That being said, as soon as it is out to beta readers, I'm going to dive back into Lightning Falls 76, finish up its first draft, continue working on that until I do another post beta reader draft on Drowned, and then then Drowned enters its sort of final stages, its production stages. So maybe it'll come out very early next year. Maybe it'll come out for Christmas this year. But then Lightning Falls 76 shouldn't be too far behind it. So, maybe we'll have a little bit of delay between the books from last year and the next books, but those should follow pretty quickly on each other and be very different stories. So those are the books that are currently in production. The books that follow those, well, we start to dive into the Weeping Cedars trilogy at that point, which is a retelling of the Weeping Cedars podcast, but not from the perspective of the characters in the podcasts. We will, of course, see them. We will see the archivists. We will see Emma. We will see Clarence. All those characters will be back, but we're going to be focusing on other characters and other stories that we only got the periphery of through the podcast. So that's what's coming in. After that is Weeping Cedars, Ursus Spelaeus, the Cave Bear, And I think that's that's what I'm looking forward to maybe the most, because it's going to reveal all sorts of stuff, and it's going to bring together characters from all different strands of this stuff. It's not the end of the arc. It's maybe what you might consider kind of like a peak middle point before we charge towards the end in theoretically 2036, 10 years from now. So who knows? So that's sort of the state of the books. Currently coming out in the monthly newsletters are 2 stories. One of those stories I haven't really talked about at all yet. The other one is Console. And Console is a story that I actually started telling over a year ago, and nobody noticed. I dropped 3 videos on... well, I won't say nobody noticed. Nobody noticed the connection. I will say that. I dropped 3 videos on YouTube of a computer and called it Process. There was a hint in Process about how to get to Console. Nobody found that, which is fine. I put out the Morse code and on the Samite podcast, and that people were able to decode that and get to the Console website on the Weeping Cedars website, which is just weepingcedars.com/console. Right now, you can actually just go there without that. You can find it in the side stories menu. Once that was out there, we started to tell the Console story. And that sort of came in a big burst at the beginning, where you're able to explore this computer on the website. And then it kind of had to be put on hold while I edited 2 audiobooks and got Lightning Falls and Shards of Amber ready to be produced and published. I started to put Console stuff back out in December, and we've been kind of rolling along with that since then. This month, in February, there's a big drop for Console. There's more content this month than there has been since the release. The thing about Console is that it is primarily a short story. It is primarily a short story about a character in this universe, and a couple of characters in the universe, but primarily one who we have and haven't met yet. And that's all I'll say about that character. Console is an exploration of this computer, and if you don't know how to access the computer, it's really a version of DOS from the 1980s and the early 1990s. If you remember typing in things to move around a system, if you were alive back then, you should have some familiarity with how to use this. But I'm also really encouraging people, instead of just putting out what's found on Console, put out videos of it, do screen recordings of how you access things and the results, because that certainly communicates to people more the experience of using this little computer. And the computer itself is part of the story. So it's not just a puzzle. And of course, the puzzles are also part of the story. So it's not just an ARG, an alternate reality game. It's not really that. It's a different kind of story that is integrated through these puzzles. And I know that maybe that doesn't make a lot of sense at the moment. It makes sense to me because I know the story, and hopefully at the end you will see why it was told in this way. I hope that if you've engaged with a lot of the Weeping Cedars content, by now I've purchased just a tiny little bit of trust on formatting. And maybe not. Maybe you're like, look, I listen to this thing despite the formatting. I hate the formatting. Well, then maybe Console's not for you, or maybe you think I'm an idiot for putting it out that way. And maybe you're right. But from my perspective, it makes sense to tell this story this way. And so if you like the idea of exploration and an ever-evolving story, Console might be for you. It might be worth checking out. If you like little puzzles and messing with old computers, yeah, give it a look. Every month, pieces of that story come out towards the end of the month. The other story that's being told at the moment is, this is very typical of Weeping Cedars, is I am taking characters that were mentioned in about 2 paragraphs in one episode of Weeping Cedars and starting to tell their entire story. And part of this is to link things in the Weeping Cedars timeline that may not obviously be linked, but it's also to explore some of the earliest parts of Weeping Cedars because we haven't really been back there in a while. We haven't really explored early parts of Stone Ford and what relationships and people were like back then. And this story that's being told in the newsletter, currently between Emmanuel Cartwright and Matthias Visser, is a look into those early days and hopefully fleshes out this like 2-paragraph section of one episode in season 1 of Weeping Cedars. It also will connect with later pieces of the story, and that correspondence is going to go on well beyond the lives of those 2 characters. So the Visser family history is really what we're going to be exploring in those letters for at least a year, maybe a little bit more. And my hope is that you will be able to see how a family changes over time in the Weeping Cedars world. And that also will at least dovetail with, if not directly interact with, but at least dovetail with Drowned when it comes out. The other big thing that is happening in the Weeping Cedars universe, but is currently on hold until the summer, is Camp Weeping Cedars. That is a different storyline. It is a different short story about a cluster of characters. And some of these characters you've heard of before, some of them you have not. It's all part of a story that you started to get told in season 1 of Weeping Cedars, and I'm fleshing it out now. This is another one of those examples where I had an idea early on to do a podcast, and it's now transformed into Camp Weeping Cedars. So Camp Weeping Cedars will reopen in June. I have everything written for this year's Camp Weeping Cedars. It's supposed to be a 3-year story. Most of next year is also written. I just need to make the stickers. So, and then, put the materials together. And that's coming out in June. And I think we'll be open June, July, August. I think it goes June, July, August, maybe the beginning of September. And then camp closes again for the year. When everything's over, when all 3 years of camp are done, I think my plan is that the following summer, I'll just release everything and you'll be able to get it every summer. What is limited is the single summer journals. So this year I will offer a combination journal of last year's journal and this year's journal. This year's journal will only be available this year. So if you want to get this sort of limited edition little booklet, that's only going to be available this summer. So I'll let you know, obviously, on this podcast what that is. But yeah, that's Camp Weeping Cedars is another complicated story told in a complicated way. Because I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting to tell these different stories in different modes. And if one isn't for you, that's okay. There's a lot of different versions of storytelling going on. But I really like Camp Weeping Cedars because it is exploring something that is hard to explore because of the supernatural elements in that story. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how people make the connections and how people understand who the characters are. And if and when those characters show up in other stories, some of them already have, some of them will later. And then other connections are going to be made later in other stories. So yeah, my hope is that you can enjoy the sort of confusing story as it exists, but then as you pull it all together, you can understand the meanings of these things. And that is a lot of what Weeping Cedars is about, is finding meaning that you've already encountered and seeing it in a new light, but also unpacking little boxes of horror that are only horrific because you have other information. Things that on the face of them might be bad, but they're definitely not as bad as they are once you see them in their full light. So that's sort of the ethos, and we're hopefully continuing that with Camp Weeping Cedars. So as I look down my list, I think I've hit everything. So this is the part of the show where I'm going to shill. I'm going to say, hey, join the Patreon, patreon.com/weepingcedars. For a couple of bucks a month, you get into a bunch of private conversations. They're not hopping, like I'm not in there every day talking because people in general aren't talking. So, but if you want to come in and just be a chatty Cathy, you're welcome to do that. And I'm there on there responding. The only thing I will say is that Patreon is bad at letting me know when new chats happen. So if I take a little while to respond, that's only because I don't expect people to be chatting. But if people start chatting more, I'll be on there more. The Discord is going through a weird phase right now. I reopened it back up again, and then Discord immediately made everything difficult with age verifications and everything. I like to keep the Discord 18 plus, not because we're doing any sort of like weird Michael Wolling-Breyer fan art over there. But because I just think it's safer to keep things adult in private spaces for adults, especially when you don't know whether or not there are kids there. So I prefer let's just keep that space adult, but it is also making it very difficult because even adults are having a hard time verifying properly without sharing a bunch of private information. So we don't know whether or not Discord is going to survive, I think, at the moment. But the Reddit is open to absolutely everybody, and you can post over on the Reddit. It's a great little community. We haven't had any of the sort of more difficult elements of Reddit where people are just being jerks. We have had people talk about how they don't like elements of the show, and that's great. I want people to feel free to say that they don't like certain things. I will cry. That's fine. You shouldn't worry about that. But I do want people to feel able to critique the show. And I will do my best not to defend it. I will do my best to just keep my mouth shut. So come and hang out. Come and be part of the community. Ask questions. And ask questions of me here. Again, leave comments. You can send me an email at contact@weepingcedars.com. And if you have not read the books, if you haven't read Lightning Falls, check it out. It's an okay book. I like it a lot. And so far, the people who have read it seem to have liked it too. It's got pretty good reviews on Goodreads, but not enough of them. So if you have read it and you like it, please go review it on Goodreads. That's a big, big help. And if you bought it from Amazon and you like it, go review it on Amazon. That's also a huge help. Hey, there are Weeping Cedar stickers. You can check those out too at Etsy. You can find everything that's for sale. All the stuff I'm shilling, the books, the audiobooks, the ebooks, the stickers. All of that's at weepingcedars.com/shop. Also, if you buy a book directly from me, you will get it cheaper and I will sign it with my grubby fingers and you will get some sort of dedication in there. So, yeah, I think that's it. If you have listener questions, please send them my way. I'm going to start reaching out to people and seeing if I can get some of our performers onto the show. Now, if none of them show up, it's probably because I was a horrendous director and nobody ever wants to work with me again. So if you find that nobody shows up on the show, well, that you can draw your conclusions about, how I am to work with. So with that being said, I will wrap this up. Our theme song is Herbstlied in Zartbitte by Ola August, because I will not pick songs that have titles in English for anything, apparently. I found that on Pixabay. I listened to a whole bunch of like dream pop and shoegaze because that's kind of the vibe I'm in at the moment. And yeah, I don't know. You guys let me know what you think. But so that'll do it. That'll do it for this first full episode of Goodnight, Faithful Friends. I've been your host, Josh. You can find everything I do at weepingcedars.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of the Weeping Cedars universe. And until next time, good night, faithful friends.